All right, Mr. Abdul, I'm excited to dive in with you today. I love what you're working on. I will say you are one of the few people I meet who has worked on pretty much one project, one company for your entire career. Is that right? Pretty close to it?
Right.
Yeah. So what did you do? You came out of college and then started this company. What was the early days like?
Sure.
And also, too, let's describe, how do you articulate what T-CETRA does? Because it's not obvious, as you know, it's not a consumer product per se.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity. So, yeah, I mean, I actually did this while I was still in college. I was in college. I had a bunch of friends. At the time, they were selling calling cards. So those are the scratch calling cards that you would call back then, like your cell phone and your landline, like needed like a long distance package. So they were selling that. And they said, well, it's the way of selling it was just really clunky. You got to ship it, those cards, people run out. And there's a new way of doing it electronically. I was still in college. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds like it's something that needs to be solved. And they said, yeah, in Europe, they solved this a long time ago. It's been selling electronically. So instead of those cards being like physically hang up on stores, they can just be printed on demand. So the promise at the time was just simply like, okay, well, we're going to enable those scratch cards that people scratch to make phone calls to be made available. And I actually ended up just taking this to different directions, but that's how we started. And I was in the electrical and computer engineering department. That's what I was doing. So I had a little bit of background, but I knew I needed somebody to help. So it was really a lot of friends that just kind of believe in you early on. So I had friends that took classes with me. I had a professor at Ohio State. I went to Ohio State University. And I said, look, my friends are telling me we're trying to put this. And I was like, yeah, they really were very much encouraging. And I still am in contact with those guys at Ohio State. We do a lot of like joint stuff together. But yeah, they encouraged me to do this, and we built the initial system that just delivered on that. So that store owners at the time, and that used to have, like, when you walk into like a convenience store, you'd have like on the back wall like just a $10 card for AT&T, $20, $30, all these different denominations. And then if any of those stores get broken into, these are the first thing that people usually want to steal, because I mean, it's really can turn into cash in real time. So when it's a terminal that printed those vouchers or those PIN cards or those scratchable cards. If the store closed, that machine is not printing. So they can steal the hardware. It's a couple $100 hardware, but there were no products to be stolen. They had to put a PIN to print those cards. So that was really kind of how we got into the space.
Huh. So let me mirror that back to make sure I understand it. So it used to be that you had the scratch off card. This is to encourage loyalty programs, so people keep coming back to the coffee shop or the restaurant. And that used to be just a piece of paper with a scratch off, but then you moved it to be electronic, so that you have to swipe it and then enter a PIN. In other words,
Sure.
keeping it secure.
Right. They call it, the fancy name of calling it, it's called stored value. So like if you wanted to buy like AT&T $20 card, you could just walk in and buy that $20 AT&T, and there's a 16-digit behind that scratch code. And then you would load it into your phone, and you can make phone calls worth of $20. And then instead we said, well, instead of actually having that physical card, shipping it to the store, hang it up, somebody can walk in and say, I want to load $20 on my phone. And then there's a little like desktop terminal, very tiny, and they'll ask the customers, like, what's your phone number? So the customer will provide the phone number, and they'll say, I want maybe $22 or $25, or so they'll load the exact amount and just eliminates the card. If somebody still wanted to have a PIN because maybe they want to load it later, we still made that available. But we really eliminated the need to ship a physical product when we knew it was just a 16-digit that really kind of got on that value.
Interesting. That's such a in-depth, it's like a very specific application. You know, I guess
Right.
in hindsight it's obvious, but I mean, was
That's how we started.
Yeah. And so, okay, so you make that, and then you go around, you're knocking on doors selling it, right? You're saying, hey, maybe you target the stores that got broken into, and you say, hey, you don't want this to happen to you again. Why don't you buy our piece of hardware? Is that what you're selling?
Yeah, so at the time we said there's a piece of hardware you buy. Now everything is on a computer, because now everybody has a computer in those stores. Their cash register used to be like just a clunky cash register. Now it's a computer, so they don't need it. We still have some customers that are on those credit card terminals. But yeah, we the promise was very easy. You run out of cards, those cards get stolen. You may not be able to carry every last option. At best, you'll probably carry 2 brands. and every brand has like 3 or 4 denominations, and there's just so many brands. And so instead of paying for something, you just need to, instead of like stocking $10,000 worth of cards, you just need to buy a $200 hardware, and it'll print those on demand. So if you had a busy day and you printed $500 worth of cards, we swept your account the following day for $500. If you had a slow day and you only sold 50, we only swept 50 out of your account. So you really didn't need to lock a lot of cash flow as a store owner, and you didn't need to run out. And back then, the phone companies like the AT&T and the Verizon of the world at the time, they wanted their higher denominations to be available. So your $50, $80, $100, and then people didn't want to stock it. So we said, well, look, you don't have to stock it. You'll just print it. You'll print it out of the terminal. Those terminals had it's just like your credit card terminal. When you swipe the card, we built an application. This is like 14 years ago, but we built an application on that credit card terminal so that when you go in, you'll select AT&T, you'll select $80, just like a receipt would come out, and it will have the $80 PIN code in there, and people load it and it works. But we took that obviously to so many other industries. We took it. We later found out that there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that we could help in. But really, it was just making. And those are for customers that are buying it on prepaid, buying like prepaid phones. Like if you and I had cell phone back in 2008, probably we had a phone bill come to in the mail, and we'd pay the bill. But people that were month to month, that's how they loaded $50 on their phone. They had to physically go to a location and say, hey, I want a $50 or $100, and they just load it. That's the only way it was possible.
Okay. And where are you guys now? So you have 120 people on the team based in Ohio. Is that right? Did I get the number right? 120?
Actually, we're now 170.
Wow.
In COVID, the beginning of COVID, we were about 120. Now we grew to 170. So yeah, so I later found out that look, there's about 80 million people in the U.S. that are cash preferred. They like to shop in person. Like you
80
and I
million?
shop online. Yeah, 80 million
Good
people.
God. How many people do we have? Like 300,
people.
350? Is that about right? 300?
Yeah.
So 1 out of every 4 people prefer to shop online. Shop with cash.
Yeah. They're referred to as cash preferred. They might be like new immigrants. They come from places where that's what they know how to do things, or maybe they don't like the bank because they don't think they make enough money, or maybe the banking solution to them is not a good fit. Like even to me, like how I bank today is different than how I banked 15 years ago, and the banks are adopting to it. There's more mobile banking. There's more things that are done to attract us who banked 20 years ago. They're trying to like make sure that we're banking the way that makes sense to us. Like the last time I visited the bank was probably like a couple years ago. Yeah. And every time I go to bank, it's probably to notarize something or do something. It's never really to do banking these days because you do everything through the mobile app. But the underbanked, they also view the bank as like, okay, well, the traditional bank is really not what I need. So they shop in person. They pay cash for what they get. And they are usually, when it comes to wireless service, they're usually using prepaid. So it's month to month. And so we took this service and we said, well, these customers come to those places to pay the bill. How about us making them also provide them access to do other things? So we got into wireless first. So we did everything in wireless. We made sure that service can be activated on our system so that if a customer walked in, they want service for the first time, that we got into the business of helping the wireless carriers find those customers. So like the wireless carriers, it's hard to find those cash paying customers. And you got to be physically in a place. So we've created the platform that if somebody walked in and they want a phone, that within a couple of minutes, they can walk out with an activated phone. If they're switching from an existing service provider to another, like, so they might be like, say, with Verizon, they want to switch to T-Mobile, or they might be with AT&T, they want to go to Verizon. We are the system that this clerk behind the counter, if somebody walked in, we are the system now that will say, well, you want the service, you want this plan, you want to activate this phone. It's our system, it's our mechanics that enable it. It's our customer service here in the office that really take on those calls and supports those dealers to make that transaction happen. And again, those consumers are walking in because online it's available. You can buy all these products online, but you get in-person questions and answers. And usually those stores are deep in those communities. So if you're talking about immigrant communities, you might have like a Latino person behind the counter talking like in Spanish. It might be Middle Easterns. It might be like all these different. So it's really deep in those communities, and they're answering those questions and just making it simple to them. So that's really kind of how we got in it. But then later we said, well, we're doing it in wireless, but there's so many other industries. I mean, we started thinking of like this underbanked and underserved community. I mean, they have the same aspirations that you and I have. They want to be able to stream movies online. 15 years ago, you and I went to like a movie place and stood online, browsed our movie, went home, and they did the same. But now we're not going to a physical place. We're doing it online. Well, today, I mean, most streaming services require a credit card. So these guys like feel like they're left behind. So really what we focus on, we try to enable access to products and services that they aspire to have. They want to have just like the rest of us want to have. They just want to be able to buy it in person, interact with it in person, pay for it in person. And we encourage them to sign up with like auto pay and when it's available. But some of them, they would feel more in control of their budgets if they didn't sign up for auto pay, just came every month, paid the service. We have some customers that have been on the same service for 5 years. They just like to come every month, pay for it. They'll grab something else from the store, but that's what they know how to do. They feel comfortable. They feel in control when they do it.
Super cool. All right. So here's what I got so far. So you guys provide the service to the companies who sell the prepaid phones and the ability to change plans, which I assume is pretty closely related. So specifically for the stores that I'm picturing, like I use Verizon with an iPhone, so it's probably not the because it's people that don't use the credit card by de facto. So these would be like, hey, I just need a phone to make some calls, or I pay for my internet usage. And you can go get some like Samsung phone and just pay minutes, right? So this is the way I understand it, and I really don't know a lot about this. I'd love to learn more. But the way I understand the phone system and the carrier relationship to work is that when you purchase the phone, you're purchasing a piece of hardware, and then you are loading up the plan. So you can use AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, even if you have the same. I mean, in the early days of Apple, I remember the iPhone was only available for AT&T users, but that's no longer the case, right? You can use a hardware with any carrier. And when you switch carriers, well, I'll say that the carrier maintains a really important thing is that they're maintaining your identity. So what I think of is, from a personal experience, if you're trying to confirm your account information on a banking site or call, they'll often text you a phone number or text you an ID. Like, we're using SMS as two-factor authentication, and we're using dial-in phones from cell phones as your method of identifying who you are. So it's super valuable. Like, so many things actually boil down to the cell phone, and having your plan be secure, so people can't just come in and take that, is really valuable. So the carriers provide that service. What's the challenge there? So if I wanted to go into one of these stores, buy the phone, and then sign up for a plan, is the difficult part, how do I pay the plan itself? Like, how do I pay Verizon in cash?
Sure.
And you provide, like, are you basically taking money from the stores and then you're sending batch payments to carriers, or am I totally far off?
Sure. No. Let me. Yeah. I think you got it. So what happens is that, first thing I want to say, like, the unbanked customers are actually not just using the phones to make phone calls, they're actually deeply using the data. Like, in some cases, they use data more than the average person does, because they may not have Wi-Fi at home. So they really rely on that as a primary way of being online. And they're all using smartphones. I mean, we still sell some non-smartphones, but it's probably in the single digits. But yeah, so the process, usually, you said it correctly. There's a wireless carrier. Those are the provider of the service. Those are the ones that will power the phone from a connectivity standpoint. And then you've got the OEM that makes the phone. So like Apple, Samsung. But in this space, you got to make sure that you make that product available at the point of sale. Like, if somebody's buying it in person, they usually walk in, they'll say, I want a Samsung, and they may buy an iPhone. We sell a lot of iPhone and Samsung, probably Apple and Samsung make up probably like 80% of the space. And you've got a bunch of other smaller players that compete for the 20%. So customers walk in, they pretty much know they want either Apple or Samsung. They might not know which Apple they want, but if somebody is in the Apple world, they probably want to maintain that, or if they're in the Android space, they probably would prefer to be on the Samsung side. Now, which Samsung do they want? So they get helped on figuring out what model fits their needs, their budgets. And then they choose what carrier they want. And that's really kind of where the space is that because you're really not signing a contract. In this space, it's month to month. So you're paying for the phone and you're paying for the service. And those services are discounted because they're really the carrier, he does not have to subsidize the phone as much. If you were to sign a 2 years contract, you'd probably get a free phone or buy one, get one half off. They're giving you $1,200 phone. The unbanked and underserved, they're usually, if they're buying an iPhone, they're buying a 2 years old iPhone, so it's pre-owned. So think of it the same as an auto industry. You may not, your first car may not be a brand new car. It might be like pre-owned. It has some miles on it. Same thing with the phones. A 2 years old phone will function the same way, but maybe the battery life will be a little bit less. So they're buying those phones, but the service is exactly the same. They're not going to drop calls. It's just the same network that someone who gets a bill in the mail will get. So it's exactly the same. But in the experience in the store, you walk in, you choose the hardware, you choose the service, and now the service comes in a SIM card. So they'll put that SIM card inside. Most phones are going to be coming out with eSIMs, so you don't even need that physical. So you just kind of through the menu say, hey, I want to have the service provider. And the beauty of that, if you were to travel somewhere overseas, you land somewhere, you're like, oh, well, let me download a new SIM card for this country. So it's actually pretty cool. But yeah, that's what they get. They pay for it in person, and they walk out within like 5-10 minutes with the service ready. And 30 days later, they come back. All they have to do is just make the payment. If they sign up with AutoPay, then it's deducted out of their card or bank account, and they don't need to come back. But like I said, 60 or 70% of the customers that shop in this channel ends up signing up with AutoPay, but some will prefer to come back and pay in person.
And I'm with you on everything. What does and sorry if this seems a little thick, but what role specifically does T-CETRA play? You're not owning the stores.
No,
you're providing.
No, we don't. So,
yeah,
sure. So we are looked at as the. T-CETRA is really kind of a technology company that builds those platforms. We don't sell the technology that we build, but we build it to enable like acquiring those customers. And like so far, we only covered wireless, but we acquired customers for service providers that want to acquire cash paying customers. So like a service provider like Verizon and AT&T, if they can get a subscriber, even though it's a month-to-month subscriber, but they're willing to spend commission dollars to acquire that customer. So we have this platform. It's called VIDAPAY. That's what those independently owned and operated retailers know us by. So this would be like I don't know, Portland Electronics or Abdul's Mobile. Those are like independently owned and operated wireless store. It might be a convenience store that has a wireless section inside. So they use this platform called VIDAPAY. It's our own platform built in-house. And they log into this platform and they're able to order a phone or order those iPhones and Samsung. So they get to order the hardware. They get to order the SIM cards. When those show up in their stores, they get to activate them. And if a customer comes back 30 days, it's the same platform that make the payments on. So we took that, and like I said, we went so deep in wireless, and we said, well, what's in it? You got to find a customer. When you find a customer, you pay commissions to someone who helped you find it. So Bob's Wireless needs to earn a commission for finding that customer. So our job is to say, service provider, how much is this customer's value to you at? Well, let's pay a little bit commission to find them. And then every month they stay on, everybody makes a little bit of money. Because when that customer comes back to pay the $50 bill, there's a little bit of commissions that the store gets to keep, we get to keep, and then the rest of it goes to the service provider. This is really kind of how it's operated in wireless. But we found out that it works the same way when it comes to like a home internet. If you want, because like I said, a lot of those guys didn't even have Wi-Fi because it required like steps that they felt uncomfortable. We make that available to them, and then also we took it to the e-commerce. So people that want to shop online, but they weren't comfortable using their credit card, we did a partnership with Amazon where you could actually go to Amazon.com, sign up. Choose the items that you want, add it to your cart, and then right before you check out, if you don't have a credit card, you can go to any one of our stores and say, hey, I want to load $55.75 on my Amazon account. And they only have to pay $55.75. They don't need to pay any convenience fee. Amazon pay us for accepting the money on their behalf. And then in real time, that money will be on their Amazon account. And they can literally go back and hit checkout, and they'll check out. And it would be the same way if they were to use a credit card. But again, that was an example of they might want to shop online. They want to stream movies online, but they don't want to pay for it. They don't want to have a credit card. They just don't feel comfortable. They may have recently banked, but they heard stories of people credit card being stolen, and they feel like, okay, well, I want to be in more control of it. But essentially, you're exactly correct. They come in person, they get this, and it's all handled through VIDAPAY. So if you picture VIDAPAY as a portal, somebody walks in, the person behind the counter is asking them, do you want to make a payment to Verizon or to this service provider or this to Amazon? And it's mainly driven by phone numbers, because phone numbers are unique to most of those accounts. Like with Amazon, you couldn't have two Amazon accounts with the same phone number. And obviously, like with your service provider, your phone number is unique to that service. So they walk in and say, here's my phone number, and I want to make $50. And everything happens in real time, because people want to be able to, like, if their phone is out of minutes or out of service, they want to be able to get it right away. If there's items on the cart, they want to get it. They want to check out right away.
Yeah. Okay, I'm with you. This sounds awesome. So when you say your stores, do you mean the stores that you have
that use our service? Yeah, not
right.
Sorry, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
They're not that. We're not in the retail. We just provide those retailers with access to VIDAPAY, where they can accept those payments.
How many of them are there out there? How many
There's
stores?
about 10,000, actually. There's about 10,000, and like we're in all 50 states. And those are typically stores that you'll find in malls, shopping plazas. And like I said, they may be like an obvious wireless store. So like I said, like it might be like, I live in Columbus, Ohio, so you might see like Columbus Electronics, or you'll see something mobile, something wireless. And and they're usually very close to the communities that they service. And like we talked about immigrants, but some of them are not in immigrant pockets. They're everywhere.
Yeah. How did you sell into 10,000 stores? I mean, granted, you've been working on this for, I saw 2007. So you had a decent amount of time, 14 years, 15 years. But obviously you didn't go door to door. Was it like a physical approach, or was it like a call, like blitz and call as many, or everything? Mail them? Sure.
So, it took us probably like 7 years to get like maybe to 2,000 locations. But I think our biggest kind of explosions of how we grew happened in 2013. In 2013 is when we really started saying, well, we got to get, up until 2013, we were only in the business of accepting payments. So if you're an existing customer, like VIDAPAY at the time only allowed you to pay your bill for was only the platform that accepted payments. So if you're a wireless store, you only had to use VIDAPAY if an existing customer walked in and wanted to pay their bills. That was our only role. And then what we said, well, let's try to understand what is it that everybody needs in this space. So we started talking to our carrier partners, and we realized that, we need to find them new customers, and we need those customers to live a little bit longer. And they pay commissions to acquire those customers. So how can we solve that? And we said, well, those are independent dealers. That's like my example, Bob's Wireless. Bob wants to get his money quicker. He wants to get his commissions quicker. The old days of acquiring business used to be like whatever you acquired in 1 month. So say like January, whatever activations or new customers you found, like the carrier will send you a report 2 weeks later, and they'll say, hey, we'll pay you next month. So you didn't get your commissions right away. What VIDAPAY did in 2015 is that we told all these dealers that, look, if you activate through us, whatever you activate today, you'll earn the commissions instantly. We'll instantly credit your commission. So it used to be January commissions will get paid first week of March. We said your January 6th commission gets paid January 6th. And your like February 15 commissions, activations get paid February 15th. So it's on the same date. And we called that instant spiff. And boy, that blew up for us. We went from servicing like less than 2,000 locations to being in like today 10,000. It really happened very quickly. We would get calls from everywhere. It's like, we want to sign up with this platform that pays instantly. And obviously we didn't instantly credit it to their bank account, but it was instantly credited to their VIDAPAY account, which they can instantly accept payments and do other things. So it solved a huge cash flow problem for those independently owned operated retailers. And it also solved a huge problem to the service providers, because service providers want to know like where the customers is being had. So in the past, prepaid didn't have a lot of visibility. So like the carriers didn't know where this phone was sold and to whom. And now that we have this platform, we know like Bob's Wireless signed up this phone number from this location, and you can message now more effectively. You can target. If Bob is doing such a great job, you can do partnerships with Bob and send like a marketing local team to try to help dress up Bob's store to actually just do more business. So now we brought this visibility, and carriers were happy to pay a little bit quicker. because they knew that provided a tremendous value. So in our competitions, the guys that do similar services ended up catching up to it a couple years later, but it was already the time where every store in the country, and these guys, they're all entrepreneurs, they tell each other, like, hey, here's a platform that if you activate through it and partner with them, you'll be able to earn your commissions quick, and you'll be able to order your phones from the same place. And everything happens in one place, one simple invoice, one simple access, and you don't need to wait for your money. And that was the moment where, like, it really blew up for us.
That's super interesting. It is challenging. I mean, to scale to that many, like 10,000 stores is significant, and being at 170 people. How do you, I mean, there's so many things I want to ask you. First is, how did you scale? Did you have like people on your team that had built companies before, or did you just kind of solve it like one brick at a time and figure it out? And
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. So, I mean, it happens in pieces. I mean, so it's all like when you look back, we're like, okay, now it makes sense.
Yeah.
But in the midst of it, it's hard to kind of figure out, but it all happened in stages. So I think up until 2013, like I said, we were probably 20 people company. It was your close network of friends and family that helped and really believed in you. There's some people going like friends and fools, because they're the ones that really believe in you. And then that core team, by the way, is still here. They're the ones that really driving. A lot of them were friends that went to college with me. So it was a lot of my friends that believed in me. But then as time went by, you meet more partners and you meet more people. And really, we understood early on that for us to be successful, we got to be able to help the service provider be successful, the retailer be successful, and the consumer. Like we got to think, how can we make it a win-win to them?
Yeah.
And that's really kind of what really drove our growth and our success. And then people want to join a successful team, a growing team, and we were fair to them, fair to the customers, and that's really how it grew. And I think the more business we got, the more verticals we grew in. So we started in wireless, went into e-commerce, started doing other things, and as we got into transportation, so you could load not only your phone and your Amazon account, you could load your bus card, your transportation card through this. So as we built more, you get to meet more people and say, well, I'm solving this problem, and everyone that joined us helped us solve a pain point. And I mean, like I said, at the beginning of COVID, our focus was always in those retailers. But at the beginning of COVID, we started realizing that there are like small and medium-sized businesses that need the service. So we started selling the same products that we sell to in Bob's Wireless. We started selling to like small and local government, small businesses that have contractors, people that sent their employees home. They wanted to send them phones, and they didn't want to sign a 2-year contract to give their employees phones. They wanted month to month. They didn't know if COVID was going to last 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years. So they didn't want to go and sign up, get like 50 phones with 2 years contract. So we quickly adapted to this, and we started offering small businesses, like I said, small government, like local governments, like small cities. They may have employees or contractors, and they weren't able to work in person, and you can't take your desk phone with you home. Sometimes you can, but a lot of times you cannot. So we had to provide it. So we kind of adapted to it. So really the growth happens kind of in iterations, and a lot of times for a startup, and I tell people like what a 14 years old startup, but it happens if you keep the cultures like innovating cultures and embrace the innovation. I think people will join, and that's how really our team grew.
What do you think about carriers? What do you think the future is for Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile? It feels to me like there's a lot of pressure on these guys, a lot of commoditization, regulation. That's a competition that's pushing them, to do something. And I look at SpaceX, even like micro networks that are coming out, like Helix is a decentralized crypto-based like peer-to-peer internet protocol. Do you see the trend to kind of be like Blockbuster, where these guys just need to like pivot hard, or like how do if you're running one of these companies, what do you do? What are your thoughts on this?
Sure, it's a big topic. So I'll give you my take. So when you think of the carriers, I mean, they're the guys that are putting the towers, that are investing billions of dollars to buy the frequency to be allowed to use it. So they bid and they pay the FCC billions of dollars to own it. They spend billions of dollars to build the network, and billions of dollars to maintain it. So, I mean, don't want to underscore the effort that happens there. And if you look at the space over time, it consolidated significantly. And you had two major players, the number 3 and number 4 together merged. So it was T-Mobile and Sprint, and now they became one. So you really have right now 3 major players. Dish Network is also building the 4th network, so we're about to have like the 4th one again. So now, if you look at 14 years ago, this was so fragmented. This was like there had to have been at the time maybe 20 what you would call carriers between the national and the regional, but now it's much more consolidated. And I think for us as consumers, we like I said earlier, like you think of your Apple ecosystem or Samsung ecosystem, but over time you may forget who is your service provider because you're so attached to your device because you're touching it. You're touching your Apple device every day. You're not thinking of who the service provider. So it becomes like a utility. And I think that's the biggest risk for carriers over time is like people shop and over the years it changed because like 20 years ago when you bought your cell phone, you thought of the service provider and you walked in for whatever phone they gave you or you were able to afford. The conversation now starts the opposite way. It's like which phone you like more, and then you figure out which service you want. And I think as we get into 5G, and most everyone's going to have 5G, 5G is going to be so fast and that it's going to be hard to differentiate for the customers. Like the service is going to be so good and it's going to be so similar. It's like, why would I want to choose one service provider over the other? Those that move around and travel, they might appreciate coverage a little bit more. Those that live probably in areas where one service provider does not have the exact same coverage might have a win, but it's going to be very, very difficult. And these guys, I mean, do a lot of the heavy lifting, and they're the ones that have to find the customer. They're the ones that have to subsidize the phone. So Apple and Samsung, they're selling us those really expensive phones, but everybody's happy to spend now like $1,200 on a phone, but we struggle to spend on the service because the phone, we know it's the phone. So I think they're getting really disrupted, and I think we might see some new players that come into this space. So people that are not your usual suspects. So I mean, a couple of years ago, Google wanted to be in this space.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, they became an MVNO. An MVNO means like the mobile virtual network operator. So you're not really a real operator, but you'll go to the operators and say, hey, I want to become like a virtual user of yours. And we sell a lot of the MVNOs. So like when you think of it, you've got only 3 carriers now, Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile. But underneath them, there's probably like 60 different MVNOs. People that go and they're, the carriers are required to offer those MVNO agreements. So you can go in and when you sell service as an MVNO, it's your name that shows up. So when you see like two bars or 3 bars, it'll be like Google, if you would. And Google became an MVNO, and I think they offered plans and there were a time where even Apple signed up for an MVNO.
What are they?
I think those are the biggest risk.
What is the value add there? Like, what is Google pretending to add, or not pretending, but what are they adding in the value chain?
The promise is that the Google MVNO would actually operate over different carriers. So if you're with AT&T, you're only with AT&T. If you're with Verizon, you're only with Verizon. Google had become an MVNO for multiple providers at the time. And basically, you would be able to be on both networks at the same time, not even realizing. You'd be on one and roam with the other, or be on one and roam on the other one. And the beauty of it, I think, for consumers would be down the line is that you'd be able to travel anywhere around the world, and you don't even have to think about who am I using. So if I went to Europe, who am I using? Am I using British Telecom or Telefonica? If I went to Latin America, am I still using Google? And I think the biggest risk to the carriers is when new players come into the space, whether the OEM, being like the Apple and the Samsung of the world, or maybe big tech like your Facebook, your Amazon of the world, and I think it's something that we might see down the line. But it's not easy to be a carrier, but it's relatively easy to disrupt. I mean, and I think we'll see more of that in the next few years. Yeah,
it does seem like it could be like a light switch, where it's just SpaceX to me doesn't seem like they're going to eat away at it. There's going to be people who are outside of main cities and they're like, well, I don't want to pay more for this edge network. based on Verizon or whatever it is, I'm going to subscribe to SpaceX. I think that the potential for the peer-to-peer seems like if it's really going to be separated, it's if you think of the conceptual mega tower in the city that provides internet to everyone, well, the inverse of that would be like 10,000 individual boxes that all talk to each other in kind of like a crypto way that you can't break. There's no competing with that. If you have if everyone just stuck a box on their edge of their window and that just talks to the one across the street and all the way down, and it was like this whole networked thing. Well, that to me seems pretty damn robust. And, maybe it's certainly not for everyone. If you live far enough away, you can't pick up a signal, sure. But again, it's like maybe you take a 30% chunk out of the pie, at least in major cities, which is good. I think that's good for the consumer in the end. But it is, it's kind of like railroads where you're not going to build a better railroad track, but you might invent a plane. And then all of a sudden, less people are taking railroads.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, interesting.
Keep in mind, I was just going to say, keep in mind, there's about 1 billion people on Earth that still don't have access. So I think whoever figures out, if SpaceX is able to figure this out, on a satellite, which the cost of deployment is far less than having to find a local site and get electricity and backup electricity and generators and worry about the wind and worry about all the localities. If the satellite solution is going to get deployed much, much faster, and it's going to reach places that traditional mechanisms of all the last 5 generations required physical towers. And as those different, when we went from 2G to 3G to 4G to 5G, the towers' capacity and capabilities and the area they cover changed. But when you think of satellite coverage, you're talking about much, much bigger areas.
Yeah.
There may be some other set of challenges, but I think if technology was able to solve that via something like that, and I think there's I think you have SpaceX on there, and I think Facebook had some sort of also, I think, solution where it was I think. What was it? Was it
at one point they had a blimp. They were sending up a blimp up in the air.
Right.
I don't know
that lived for a year or so. It would just be floating. Right?
I think they gave up on that project though.
Right. But I think that's the direction that I expect eventually to be able to disrupt, because the cost of maintaining towers in infrastructure is really, really expensive. So I think if a technology came around that really solved that, I think we might see new players that come into this as well. And again, it's going to provide access to a lot of people in places around the world that they just don't have access. Rural America over the years have gone better, but it's usually ends up with slower speed. So you don't. I live in Columbus, Ohio. If you travel about an hour outside of Columbus, you can run into some places where you do have coverage. You make phone calls, but you're on a 3G speed. You might be going through phases where it's really dead. And I think on a cell phone cover, on a satellite coverage, that wouldn't be the case.
Yeah, it makes sense. I can certainly see satellites being the stopgap between those areas. Do you know if you're just U.S.? Is it similar? 1 billion people without internet connection it's wild to even think about that, but that's so many people. The number I heard was 1 million people come online every week, which there's 1,000 millions and a billion. So even 1,000 weeks it's a long time. So you spent your younger years in Syria, grew up and moved to the U.S. Do you still stay in touch with culturally the Middle East, or pay attention to either the technology environment, the culture, the politics? Do you stay up?
Yeah, I haven't. Sure, I haven't. I left in 2000. I was visiting until 2011 when the war started, and then didn't visit. But I still have extended family that live there that I'm in contact with, and we do travel. My family and I have 2 boys, and we were in Turkey this past summer. And I'll tell you, I think technology bridged the gap significantly. You'll be right now in the Middle East, and you've got kids growing up watching the same shows that people in Kansas are watching. So culturally speaking, when I grew up in Syria, I spoke very little English and didn't watch any of the movies. The only show that I remember watching was America Funniest Home Video, And that was the only American production content that was made available on the local TV channel. That was the only thing. And maybe like some movies every now and then. So, but now with technology and Facebook and YouTube, now you've got like a hit show that might happen in Korea is a hit show that is in Los Angeles. People want to watch it.
Yeah.
So I think technology and social media has made it so that, I mean, the world is much smaller place now. And I think, I mean, you may not have the same access to technology, same speed, but I think it's given people enough access to figure out what's happening around the world.
Hugely. I mean, it's in a way, it's good and bad, like everything. And I don't even want to label it as good and bad per se. But the interconnectedness makes us so there's kind of like a, one collective mind or one sort of culture. It starts to move that way, especially with COVID and everyone working remote. It's like we're all on the same internet. We're all using the same browsers, punching in the same websites, going on the same watering holes for entertainment. It's like, yeah, it's probably a good thing. It has a strong positive influence towards peace and commonality, being able to see, laugh at the same jokes, even if they're in a different language and it's subtitled. It's like, yeah, we all get it. We all have the same relationships in families and kids. And like, there's so much that's similar across cultures that is worth celebrating and worth bonding over that. I wish that message were to get out more. It seems like there's such a almost desire for conflict. I don't know. I Middle East in particular is a complex place because it's so old. There's the people, those groups have been around way before even just the labels of the countries. Where the U.S. it's new, so it's like all our problems are relatively new. So I don't think people are as entrenched in them. It's like, well, whatever, we'll just change it. There it's like, oh no, this has been part of our culture for thousands of years.
I'll tell you, like, I was talking earlier on how the unbanked and banked have similar aspirations. They would just want to go about it differently. And coming from the Middle East, I'll tell you, like, people have the same aspirations. People want to raise, like, when I think of my cousins and my friends that live there, I mean, they want to be able to raise a family. They want to have a happy life. They want to send their kids to school, have a good education. I mean, I grew up and my dad's goal was to make sure that we got a good education, lived a comfortable life. I think politics got in the way in places like the Middle East and really kind of destroys people's life significantly. But when you think of the people, I mean, they have the same aspiration.
Yeah.
When I visit the markets and I go into some of the like kind of the poorest neighborhoods in the country, and I'm talking like in Ohio, in Kansas, in Los Angeles. I mean, you meet the people that buy the products and services that we offer, and they have the same goals. I mean, they may have been born in a vicious cycle, in a vicious cycle that really kind of forced them to be in where they're at. But they aspire to get out. They aspire to do something different. And for us, and this is really moves me when I go and visit those places and I meet the customers and I talk to them, and you really try to understand, like, how can I bridge this gap? How can I make sure that if I want to be able, if shopping on Amazon is convenient, if streaming a movie online is convenient to me, you bet it's convenient to them. They just haven't figured out a way to access it, and their life would be so much better off with it. Like when we did the partnership with Amazon, I thought it was going to be a light switch, and like, we're going to solve the payment problem. They're going to have access. We later found out that those customers don't feel comfortable when a product show up in a poor neighborhood or in a neighborhood where if a box shows up at the front door and no one like opened the door to pick it up, it'll be gone. So like, okay, well, we knew that they needed security cameras. So we started like, well, I mean, the traditional home security that was designed years ago was not designed for the underbanked, the underserved. It was designed for someone who would sign a 2-year contract, buy a $2,000 equipment. But right now, you can buy a $90 Ring camera, buy a camera, and just give you some sense of security. It's just be an alarm. If somebody shows up, you can say, "Hey, what are you doing? Just leave the box." I mean, so you now have ways they want to be able to get it. And then we enabled Amazon like drop boxes. So now you can order stuff online, and we're deploying more and more like boxes where you can actually go in. They call them the Amazon lockers. You go to this locker, and it'll be like lock 2B, and you'll go in, grab your item, and go because you're not comfortable. So again, their aspirations are similar. they have different challenges than the ones that we got. And it's just that it needs to be solved. It needs to be addressed. And again, that's what we do to help do it. But back to your point on the Middle East, it's really a lot of people in 2020 will probably have that. It's just that they're born in a vicious cycle that makes it harder for them to get out. And it really moves me to be able to play a small role in helping people like get out of it or get access to things that they wouldn't be able to get access to it otherwise.
Yeah, well, I certainly share their skepticism of large institutions and their ability to screw over individual consumers. And it's a balancing act because they provide a lot of service as well. Do you think about the long-term sort of pressuring of people moving out of cash? I mean, I'm sure every year that goes by, less people are using cash. While it's still a large number, it is going to continue to decrease. I would imagine that crypto could provide a relief for these people because it's not for myself as well. It's not going into the mainstream banking system. It does take more technical know-how right now, and it's still an early technology relative. But do you think about, from like a strategic leadership perspective, how you move the company out of or around the cash business? I'm more curious from like how you think about it. It's still a ways away, but yeah. Of
course. Yeah, no, we think about that all the time. And I think crypto will play a role in changing that. And I think so it's really the shop in person. It's really about being in person is that I think what would be here to stay, about like this personal touch, education about the products that's always important. But we every day try to encourage customers to actually interface. Like I said, like 60% of our customers, we sign them up with autopay so that they would sign up with autopay. And for those that can have access to like a mechanism to pay with autopay, because underbanked are not necessarily someone who does not have access to a credit card. They just prefer not to use it because they feel like it might be out of control for them. So yeah, I mean, there are a lot of ways that the banking's so traditional banks are built in a way where it's too expensive for them to cater for someone who's not going to interact with them the same way a bank customer would. So there's another industry that's out there that does what you would call like wallet solutions. Mm-hmm. So it's called like prepaid wallets or like mobile wallets. It's referred to as like a prepaid debit card. It's really kind of a softer solution to what is backed by a bank. Mm-hmm. But you don't put on a so-and-so bank with a big logo and an intimidating like oh, I don't make enough money to walk into this place. I'm gonna all I got is a $200 check that I want to deposit, or a $50 check. Or there has been like an industry that's born where there's not a physical bank, but you sign up with a mobile. It's a mobile app you download. You interface with it, and you can come to locations like we service, and you can load your $200. You can take an image of a check and cash it. So you really interface with those services similarly to how you and I might interface with Chase Bank or Bank of America. It's just that there's no physical location, which I'm not using anymore, a physical location. So I can argue any one of those services would work very well for me, because if I have a check, I can cash it through an image, unless it's a really large check, which they probably won't get anyways. And then there's a direct deposit options for larger amounts. And you get a card, you can go to any ATM to service. And we as a company, we're partnering with providers of those services today to really help the customers be able to pay for video streaming from their couch, to shop with Amazon, to do all the things that we want to be able to do. It's just that having that like in-person maybe educations of how to get the service in the first place is really maybe the first step that those customers need. Yeah, so instead of thinking of your business as cash, like serving people using cash, you think of it as serving people who are on the lower banked end of the spectrum. Correct. And it's like, that's a spectrum. So there's always going to be people who are moving up the banking chain, so to speak. They're not using Zelle and Venmo and like Novo banks and things, but they're using like debit cards and things. So you think of it as moving. That's a good conceptual wrapping around the business model, which I think it's good, because this is how businesses get caught, is they think of themselves as like AT&T and Verizon think of themselves as a distribution for the internet by providing
telephone, these massive towers, and they get the word like a tower provider, and they forget like people don't care about towers. They care about access to the internet for the purpose of connecting with people. And I think that's the right mentality, thinking of it like, where's the future? I always think as a startup founder, where's the future of the industry that I'm working in? And what does that look like exactly? And then how am I positioned to move in that direction? Because if you're just taking advantage of the current inefficiencies of today's world, then you're liable to get swept, like, oh no, this company just raised 20 million and they do something that has some structural advantage to what we're doing. And now you're on your heels. And, yeah, I've seen it. I've had it happen. It's not a fun feeling. So
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Do you write, or do you actively post on social media? Are you public on?
I do every now and then. Not really active. I'd like to be able to do more. I am. Yeah. I mean, when I think of the first 10 years doing this, I was so deeply involved in the day in and day out that I wasn't able to focus on like other things that I had a passion to doing. And now I think even with COVID, I found new time that I didn't have. I travel much less now than I did before. So meetings that required a trip and like a day and a half now is just like a 2 hours thing. So you find more time to do more things. We started the foundation 2 years ago just to really help the same customer base that we service. So T-CETRA Foundation helps educate and get people out of this vicious cycle that I was talking about. So I get to do some of that, and it's very meaningful. Like it's very meaningful to me. So yeah, I get to do some of that, but hopefully I'll get to more in writing.
Yeah. What's the name come from? T-CETRA? Is it an acronym?
So T-CETRA stood for technology and etc. So we build the technology, but we also provide all the other services. So to all these service providers, you needed the technology platform to make those things happen, but you still needed billing, you still needed customer service, you needed everything else, technical support field. So T-CETRA today, prior to COVID, you got a bunch of people in the office and some people in the field. Now everyone who used to be in the office is working from home, but you have people in the field that's supporting. You've got customer service that are taking phone calls. So because you have to like when you have VIDAPAY as a platform to take all these payments, it's working around the clock, but we still maintain the relationship with the Bob's Wireless of the world. So we will have somebody local in town. If Bob's Wireless needed any help, any support, somebody will be physically, whether it's in Jacksonville, Florida, or Miami, Florida, or California. So they'll be close enough to where we have concentration of dealers that we service. They'll go and visit with them and answer any questions that they have.
Wow, that's impressive. Well, Abdul, congrats, man. It sounds like you've been heads down working, building an awesome business. You're such a success story of someone immigrating to the U.S. from Syria, of all places. And you're an inspiration for not just people coming to the U.S., but people starting businesses. So I really love the focus. Being able to do something for 15 years is not, a lot of people struggle with that. They're like, oh, I'm 3 years in. I can't keep doing this. So yeah. Good for you, man. Thanks for jumping on today. I really enjoyed it. It's been an amazing ride.
It's been an amazing ride. And I'll tell you, like moving into the U.S., it's we take a lot of things for granted now. But to me, I mean, it was definitely the land of opportunity to get education, to actually start a business, to actually tap onto resources. And I tell a lot of people that it's amazing what people are willing to do to help you. When I go back and look at 14 years, partners, people that just helped. I mean, it's the environment in the ecosystem really allows for success. You just need to be persistent and focused. And that really kind of was our recipe.
Well, keep crushing, my man. Thank you so much for hopping on today. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Awesome.